are talking Kiss of the Damned, written and directed by Xan Cassavetes from 2012 and stars heroes Milo Ventimiglia. And this is a kind of romantic vampire fantasy, I suppose. I would say people who would enjoy this primarily will be those who kind of take the quote-unquote vampire lifestyle maybe a little tad too kind of seriously for some. What is the story? So it focuses on Milo Ventimiglia's character, Paolo, who is a human that kind of sees this, you know, attractive girl in a video store and kind of approaches her to find out she's actually a vampire. And she seems to have a mutual attraction to him, and although she initially kind of tries to keep herself distanced from him, they inevitably kind of fall in love, and she turns him into a vampire. And we learn that there is this kind of vampiric society which is all kind of aristocratic and kind of very aloof, shall we say, the kind of the high society. And they're kind of secret to obviously the kind of the humans, and try to kind of, for the most part, keep themselves to themselves, feeding off animals, artificial blood and stuff like this. But Djuna, who is this kind of female vampire who Paolo is kind of in love with, has this kind of sister, which is, she's kind of like Mimi's sister, and she's kind of like this agent for chaos almost, who comes in and kind of wants to be more feral and has no problem kind of hunting humans and is quite manipulative as well. And she's essentially there to mess up the plans of everyone. What'll happen? Well, you're going to have to watch the movie to find out. So as I was kind of alluded to, I think this is more a film, I would say, for people who are very much into vampire lore. It's not really, it doesn't have a huge amount of plot to it, to be honest, and it's almost like a kind of a film where we have, it's very artistically made, and it's a film where you're experiencing the lives of these kind of vampires in their kind of day-to-day lives, and what it was like to live in this kind of vampire society with, you know, the kind of this Mimi being the kind of a little bit of a pain and causing some problems, but ultimately the kind of stakes of this movie are relatively kind of small. So let's talk about, first of all, what I think works for this film. It is very artistically directed, and I have to say is quite scrumptious looking. You do kind of feel you are watching this kind of high society way of life when we have these kind of vampire parties and things like that. They're not orgies and things like that you'd maybe expect, but they're kind of talking about you know, how their kind of society works and having these kind of conversations, but they're all very kind of upper crust, and you know, we have various different kind of opinions about where they should, you know, where they kind of sit in the food chain and where they are in society, and that's all quite interesting. And having this insight to this kind of this society that is, you know, hidden from human eye, so to speak. And Paolo is the kind of the new man there. He's kind of our point of view character because he's newly turned. He's kind of experiencing this kind of for the first time. There are also some really exotic and, well, maybe not exotic, but very fancy kind of location shooting here to again really emphasise this kind of this 1% kind of lifestyle that this vampire society kind of seems to accommodate in. And I have to say, it's extremely well cast. Everyone here, I think, does an excellent job in their roles. The acting, I think, is great across the board. And you kind of, they look the part, if this makes sense. All these kind of like these aristocratic vampires are extremely well cast on a kind of a visual standpoint. They kind of seem like kind of old money, if that makes sense. Maybe Old Blood is more of an accurate kind of depiction. When we do see kind of more of the bloodthirsty side of stuff, I have to say it is filmed again with kind of aplomb, and I think they do look pretty effective. And there are some scenes here that, you know, I think do feel suitably brutal. Although, as I've said, I would class this more of a vampire fantasy than a horror film per se, because it does have these romanticised views. So if you are kind of a fan of maybe the Anne Rice novels, I mean, it's not a period piece, it is set in kind of modern day, but it does feel like it could exist in that kind of same universe to a certain degree, you know, where we have this kind of this upper crust vampire society, and with the kind of the classical music and all of this kind of stuff, and one of these kind of head vampires. She's kind of like an actress and a theatre actress and things like this, and you know, it does kind of remind me of very much you know, an Anne Rice kind of style production. Now it doesn't work. I have some issues with the storytelling here. The big one, the biggest issue for me, which I'll kind of get out straight away, is the beginning of the movie, the first act. We are given no real characterization from Djuna, who is our main female vampire, or Paolo, who is this guy who kind of falls in love with her. Within the first 10 minutes of this movie, they've met, they've kind of had this kind of whirlwind romance, and you know, she's turned him into a vampire, and he's been absolutely nonplussed by it. He kind of doesn't react to it at all when he finds out she's a vampire. That to me is extremely weak. I suppose they might have kind of rushed through this to try and kind of get to the vampire kind of love story, but to me it just felt extremely rushed, and I didn't feel I got to know the characters of Djuna, who is the kind of the vampire woman, or Paolo at all, and yet we're kind of meant to kind of care for these characters. Now, the film is quite slow paced, so you do kind of get to know them as the film progresses, but to me it just felt this kind of attraction. He just sees her at a video shop, and it's not like it's kind of like this classic love story. He just sees her at a video shop, tries to make a move on her, and she turns him into a vampire. It's pretty much that. You know, and then he finds out she's a vampire. He's like, oh my god, you know, it doesn't really react. So to me, this first 20 minutes or so of the film was pretty weak in regards to kind of writing. And I have to say as well, there are some story elements within this movie that I didn't feel were particularly logical. Now, this movie is not a comedy of any sort. It takes itself very kind of seriously, and it is a romantic kind of fiction, a dark romantic fiction. But even so, there are some kind of logical issues here that I was thinking, this doesn't really make sense, or this kind of thing, this would happen. To give you a couple of examples, and I'm going to try to be vague here. We see a vampire having to deal with the issue of sunlight. They're kind of trapped in a kind of a forestry area, trying to escape from sunlight. Now, rather than trying to kind of like find cover in kind of like trees and bushes, they're just trying to kind of walk to the nearest house. It didn't really make a lot of sense. They don't even attempt to do that. There's also a car wreck with one scene, which kind of tells the fate of a certain character, and yet other characters surely would have noticed this a little bit later on. We also have a seduction scene that I didn't really understand how or why it happened. I mean, I understand it from the point of view of one character, but from another character's point of view, I don't know why they did it. And again, I'm trying to be vague to try and not give any spoilers here. So to me, this movie lacked a kind of real sense of any type of logic. I know we're talking about vampires and stuff here, but obviously you've got to suspend your disbelief. But to me, it did suffer a little bit from, you know, this will be a cool scene, but you won't kind of apply any type of real world logic to it. The movie as well is not going to be for everyone because, as I said, there's not a huge amount of plot. This isn't a film where we have big stakes and a kind of a real kind of character arc for kind of for the movie's characters. It's a relatively small scale film. The main thrust of it being Mimi, this kind of sister vampire, just kind of being destructive and manipulative and kind of messing up the lives of her sister, Paolo, her new boyfriend, but also the kind of maybe the vampire society at large. And it's just kind of like that in a way. So I think those people who are kind of invested into kind of vampire films and like a bit more of a romanticized kind of fantastical version of, like, you know, super attractive vampires living in a kind of a posh kind of like you know, high society lifestyle, and they're kind of like dramas that they have to go through. That's the kind of movie this is. It's not for one who wants, you know, lots of kind of murders and blood and guts, or a huge amount of vampire slaying or anything like that. It's not like that at all. But I do feel it has some value because the movie is well made. It's certainly well directed and shot. I feel the writing here is maybe the weakest link. But I will say this is an above average film for what it is, but it's not going to be for everyone. Do you like the kind of the romanticised, slower burn vampire movies? If so, then you may want to check this one out. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.